Sometimes we think about the scriptures like they're a book full of ideas about God. But there are all sorts of people with ideas about God. The scriptures are something different. It's more like you're in the middle of having a conversation about God, and he walks in the room and interrupts it himself. That's what happens here in the book of Job. You're having this ongoing theological conversation between Job and his friends, trying to work out all of these matters of divine justice, about why evil happens to people and all of that. And in the middle of this conversation, right as Job has been saying, I want God to show up. I want to make my case before him. I want to show him my innocence. Suddenly God does appear. He appears in a whirlwind, and he turns around and starts asking a bunch of humbling questions to Job. And Job has a little transformation in this moment. He says, I put my hand over my mouth. After all of these chapters of dialogue and diatribe, now he's covering his mouth. What's changed? He says this, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. There's a change that happens when you go from having heard about God, from having an outside perspective on God, he's something to be discussed, to all of a sudden, I have seen him, I have met him, I have encountered him. And this is no longer a debate. This is now a story of what I've seen and heard. So in our scripture readings this week, we see really three different perspectives on an encounter with the living God. First, in Deuteronomy, you have these people who have had an ongoing encounter with God. They've been walking with him literally through the wilderness, and now they're going to go into this land of promise. And so the call is remember. And to remember, they're told, tell the stories. Tell the commandments to your children. Make sure they're constantly before your eyes, constantly in your ears, constantly in your heart. God gives them a place where they can go to continue to meet with and encounter the living God. He gives them a series of festivals by which they will always go and re-enter those wonderful things that God has done for them in the past and celebrate those, bringing them back into the present. Remember the encounter you've had with God. Now in our epistle, we hear in 2 Peter, there are these scoffers. And these scoffers are people who are saying, things have just always gone on as they are. You talk about Christ coming, but where is this coming? It's not going to happen. But the expectation, Peter says, is that suddenly, once again, there will be an encounter with the living God where Christ will come, will interrupt everything, will bring judgment and renewal. The church lives in expectation of that encounter. But then in the Gospels, we just see in Luke the joyous chapters where we see Jesus encountering people, with God's presence is just entering people's lives. There's someone who's sick who's suddenly healed. And what happens when God himself in the flesh walks into the room and meets you? The things that seemed like they could never change suddenly change. Things that seemed impossible suddenly become possible. This is all the story of an encounter with God. People who have encountered God, people who are expecting God to come, and people who are living with this experience of God in the flesh, in Jesus. What a wonderful book it is.